Hey guys, welcome to Telling the Told and Untold. My name is Tshego. I know I haven't uploaded in a while, but I promise I'm gonna do better by you guys. Today's case, we're gonna focus on a very rare type of crime that takes place, and it's known as Caesarean kidnapping. And with that, we're gonna go into the final episode after a really long time of the Profiler Diaries, and it's titled Womb Raiders. On the 6th of January 2012 at around 11 a.m., Valencia Behrans was on her way to Loretta Cook's home. They lived in Tshego near Randfontein, and it's a very small little town, low to middle income colored area, and Valencia was on her way to Loretta Cook's home, which was about 300 meters away, just a street over, because Loretta had spoken to her earlier that morning and told her to come over and to come get a pram that she had just laying around the house that she wanted to give to her. Valencia was 9 months pregnant, and she was about to have her 5th child with her partner Joseph and her 6th child overall. There's no evidence that her and Loretta were like friends or anything like that, but they did live in like a small town where everyone really just like, where everyone knew everyone. So it's not like it was a complete stranger to her. A witness later said that they saw Valencia earlier that morning and wished her a happy new year and asked where she was heading to, and she told this witness that she and Loretta were going to the clinic. Once Valencia got to Loretta's house, Loretta told a 15-year-old girl that like lived with her. I'm not sure the relation, but her name was Lerato, and basically just told her to go to the shop and go buy bread. And Lerato remembers seeing someone that like she hadn't seen before, and this was the last time Valencia was seen alive. After a while, Lerato came back, and she says once she got home, the gate was locked, so she just jumped over the gate, and once she jumped over the gate, she saw Valencia's body lying in the courtyard, and she was just really terrified and then ran to her room and locked herself there. About an hour after Valencia went to Loretta's home, Loretta called her mom Matilda, and she seemed out of breath. Matilda was at Home Affairs with her son because she wanted her son to apply for like an ID book, and she remembers that the phone call got like cut, and she started panicking because Loretta was also pregnant, and she was 9 months pregnant just like Valencia. So her mom Matilda was scared and thought that maybe Loretta had gone into labor, so she called her sister-in-law and asked her sister-in-law just to go over to the house and make sure that Loretta had made her way to the clinic. So basically Loretta had started living with her mom from the 1st of December the previous year because she was finally on maternity leave, and that's why she was staying with Matilda. So throughout the video I'll probably say like Matilda's home or like Loretta's home, but it is her mom's home and she's just living there for the time being. So after Matilda called her sister-in-law and asked her to go to the house and make sure that Loretta made her way to the clinic, her sister-in-law called her back and told her that she got to the home but the gate was locked and she was unable to lock it. And after this, Matilda told her not to worry, that her and her son would be home soon so that they could unlock the gate and just make sure that Loretta was okay. Eventually they got home and Matilda managed to unlock the gate, and they got into the house. And I should note that never have Matilda, her sister-in-law, or like Matilda's son, they've never mentioned seeing Valencia's body lying in the courtyard, but we know it was lying in the courtyard because Lerato saw it like probably like an hour earlier when she came home after buying bread. But anyways, they got into the house and they were searching for Loretta because obviously they think that she's in labor, maybe there's something going on, and they were like searching through the house and they couldn't find her. And afterwards, Matilda's son kind of just like screamed for his mom and told his mom that there was a baby lying in the passage. So Matilda got like a couple of towels and went and wrapped the baby up, and then her and her sister-in-law went to the clinic just to make sure that the baby was okay, because obviously for them they believed that the baby was Loretta's. Whilst they were at the clinic, Matilda received a phone call from her son, and her son basically told her that they had found Loretta. And after this, Matilda basically just admitted the baby to the clinic, gave her details, and rushed back home to go see where her daughter Loretta was. So once she got home, she found out that Loretta was found in her little brother's room. So basically, he lived in the outside room. So you know, like some houses have like the main house and then they have like a back room, or like just like a smaller like cottage thing outside, and that's where Loretta's younger brother stayed. That was basically like just his bedroom. So apparently they were looking for Loretta in the house. They couldn't find her, so they went to his room, and once they got there, it was locked. They couldn't get inside, so they took an axe and basically broke down the door, and that is where they found Loretta. And they say when they found Loretta, she was unconscious, and the bottom of her dress was filled with blood. Matilda then went to Loretta, and after a while Loretta gained consciousness, and Matilda asked her like what happened, what's going on, and Loretta just said that she didn't remember what happened. As all of this was happening, Valencia's body was found outside the courtyard, and she was found laying flat on the ground with her head partially in the municipality dustbin, and she was still clothed with her pants on, her top on, and her feet were tied together. But despite this, her case was initially not ruled as a homicide or a murder, and they just assumed that she had went into labor, given birth, and then passed away from labor complications, which doesn't make sense if this person is lying like with her head basically in a dustbin and her feet are tied together. But the first police officers on the scene didn't think anything of it. They took everything at face value, and they didn't think about going into the house, and they were just like, oh, okay, labor complications, that's why. One of the earlier police reports from a witness state that Valencia and Loretta had gone to the clinic, and then after that they had returned to Matilda's home, and then Valencia had went into labor, given birth, and then Loretta took the baby to the clinic, which we know isn't true, because Matilda's the one that found the baby and Loretta was nowhere to be found, and at that point no one had seen Valencia, or at least they don't mention having seen her. So at this point, everyone in like the community had heard what happened, and people are like basically rushing to Matilda's home to see what was going on. And one of Matilda's neighbors is basically married to a constable, so like the constable's in-laws. I hope that makes sense. So the constable's in-laws called him because they knew he was off duty, and just thought that he could come over and assist with what was happening at Matilda's home and Valencia and all of that. So once he arrived at the house, the first thing that he noticed was that it was just full of a lot of people. Some of the people had already started cleaning up, and it was just a mess. And he became very suspicious when, like, once he got there, because no one could tell him what had happened to Valencia, and no one could tell him where the baby was. He saw Valencia's body as well, and saw that her feet were tied, and just everyone's stories just weren't making sense. And just from the get-go, he just knew that something was just very wrong. Another lieutenant who was at the scene was told that a razor blade was found near the baby, and that the baby had like a large gash on her forehead. But he wasn't like I don't think he was like one of the first police officers that was there or was like in charge of the case. So he didn't take note of it, because he thought that the other police officer would like take this as evidence and like make a follow-up, but that didn't happen. Valencia's brother, who was also on the scene, said that he noticed that there was like a blood trail from the dustbin to like the drainage pipe system, like on the stoop. There was a lot of blood in the kitchen as well as like the stoop outside, and some people said that they noticed that there were drag marks, like blood drag marks from the kitchen leading towards like outside where Valencia's body was found, and they just assumed it was like, it looked as though Valencia had been dragged and then she was just like bleeding profusely. At least 2 people noticed that Valencia was still wearing her pants, and they thought that was a bit strange if she had given birth, because like, how are you going to give birth wearing your pants? And even if she had taken off her pants and then given birth, how like did she put them back on if she died so suddenly and had like labor complications? For them, it just didn't make sense. It was just very suspicious. And a second thing that people noticed is that Valencia didn't have any blood on her hands, which they assumed she would if she was like giving birth and like reaching for like her baby and like pulling her baby out, and they assumed that maybe she just did have help. So it was just very suspicious to them, and they took note of this. At the clinic where the baby was, the staff noticed that the baby had like a huge gash on her forehead, and they also noticed that the umbilical cord was still attached. Like obviously like one side was attached to the baby, it was still attached, and then the other side was attached to the placenta. That same day, Matilda and Loretta were put in an ambulance, and after this ambulance went to go pick up Joseph and the newborn baby, and then this ambulance took all 4 of them to Leratong Hospital, which is very strange. Why, like, no one knows why the ambulance put them both in the same ambulance, like why they couldn't come like with 2 different ambulances. It was just like a weird situation. It was just weird. But once they got to Leratong Hospital, obviously like they were separated, and one medical officer went to Loretta and her mother, and it was noted that Matilda like answered most of the questions when the medical officer was just checking how Loretta was doing. And Matilda told the medical officer that Loretta was expecting, and after this Loretta told the medical officer that she was, and she could feel the baby moving inside of her. Later that night, the attending medical officer received a phone call for her just to go to the reception, and the ambulance that had transported like the baby and Joseph as well as Loretta and Matilda from like their respective places came with the umbilical cord. And the nurses remember looking at it and thinking that it looked strange, like it didn't look like it was a placenta. And after this, the like medical officer was just like, it's not, it's the uterus, which doesn't make sense, because when you give birth, you don't give birth, like your uterus doesn't come out. Like, uterus doesn't come out, it's your placenta that comes out. So even that was just very suspicious and just raised a lot of eyebrows about Valencia's death and just that whole situation. 3 days later, on Monday the 9th of January, Loretta was back at the hospital, and the doctor just wanted to check up on her and her baby. And after this, the doctor just requested an ultrasound. And if you hadn't guessed it by now, Loretta was not pregnant, and the doctor told Loretta this, and Loretta basically was just fighting with the doctor and told her or him that she was pregnant, and she was like, no, I have sonar scans to prove it. And the doctor was just like, you're not pregnant, there's nothing in there, which is weird if she was 9 months pregnant as she claimed. After this, we finally hear Loretta's version of events about what happened that fateful day. So according to Loretta, that morning, the 6th of January, she asked Valencia to come over to come get a pram. And later that morning at around 11, Valencia went over to go get the pram. And once Valencia arrived, Loretta noticed that the like municipality hadn't come to empty the bin. So like, you know how like that truck comes and takes your rubbish once a week. She noticed that they hadn't come, so she like moved the rubbish back inside the yard, which some people find it very strange. Like, why would you bring rubbish back into your yard instead of just leaving it outside? But that's what she did. And then she said once she got back, she noticed that Valencia was bleeding, so she went to go get a couple of towels to come like help her. And then she said once she got back, Valencia had passed out from blood loss. So Loretta had been dating her boyfriend since the 16th of December 2009. So they had been dating for a couple of years at this point. And her boyfriend lived in Potchefstroom. He didn't live like in the same town as Loretta. I'm assuming that's because like where he worked most of the time. So on that day, he remembers that Loretta called him twice. I should note that his name isn't mentioned anywhere, so just for the purpose of this video, I'll be referring to Loretta's boyfriend as Matthew. So Matthew says that he received 2 phone calls from Loretta that day. The first phone call, like, she called him and told him that she thinks she's going into labor and that she's going to pack a hospital bag just in case she has to go to the hospital. Then the second time she called him, she basically just told him that she loved him, but like she started crying after that and she didn't seem okay. So Matthew said that it wasn't unusual for Loretta to call him and tell him that like she loves him, but like he could hear that something was wrong, but he didn't know what it was. So after that phone call ended, he called Matilda, Loretta's mom, and just asked her what was going on and asked her to please check on Loretta. And this is when Matilda told him that she wasn't home, but like she is on her way home, and once she gets home she will call him back just to let him know that Loretta is doing okay. The next day, Matilda called Matthew and told him that they were on their way to the hospital. After this, Matthew made his way from Potchefstroom to the Quoomsters. I hope I'm pronouncing that properly. But yeah, he made his way there, and then once he got there, someone told him that like, listen, there was some girl's body was found in your yard. And then I don't know how he took that, but then the next day he went back to Potch, and then on Monday the 9th of January, so like 3 days after Valencia's murder, he received another phone call, and basically they told him that, listen, that woman who was found in your yard, her stomach was cut up. Now I'm going to tell you what happened from Joseph's point of view, and remember, Joseph is Valencia's partner and the father of the baby girl. So Joseph says that usually like the night before when they go to bed, Valencia will tell him like if she has any plans for the day, but that night she didn't say anything, and then Friday morning he woke up really early and went to work. At around 1 p.m. he received a phone call from someone telling them that Valencia had slipped and fallen, and then after this he just like left everything that he was doing and ran to Matilda's house. Once he got to Matilda's house, he saw that there was like a body covered with like a piece of material or like a blanket, so he went there and just like peeked to see who it was, and that's where he identified the body as that of Valencia's. He then sat with her until like those mortuary people come to collect the body, and it's so sad, but like he sat with her with an umbrella open covering her body because it's January, it's summer, and he was just protecting her body from the sun, and that's so sad. And just stayed with her until they came and collected the body. After they came and collected the body, he finally went inside the house, and he also noticed that there was just a lot of blood all over the place. So once Joseph got into the house, someone shouted at him and told him that his baby was at the clinic. So he just dropped everything again, went to the clinic, identified himself as the baby's father, and I think after a couple of hours the ambulance arrived to take him to Lerato Hospital with the baby so the baby could get checked. And remember, once he got into the ambulance, Matilda and Loretta were there as well. So what happened is apparently the paramedics got the wrong location, so instead of going straight to the clinic to go get the baby, they went straight to Matilda's house. And once they got there, one of the paramedics said that he went into the room where Loretta was found, and remember they had to break down the door with an axe to get to Loretta. And he says once he like opened the door, he saw that there was like a stocking hanging from the ceiling, and his first thought was that Loretta had tried to commit suicide. So I'm not too sure if that's why they wanted to take her to the hospital as well as just decided to like put her in the ambulance and then go to the clinic and then take the baby, which is why all 4 of them were there. I'm not too sure, I think so, but that's basically the confusion about the ambulance and them being in the same ambulance. The next day, so the 7th of January, the day after the incident with Valencia, Matilda saw Joseph and asked him to come over to come clean up like Valencia's blood, which is just so I don't know, like she was just so insensitive about it. So he got there and he said that he noticed, like, I don't know if it was like outside where, like, you know, you have bricks and there's like spaces with cement, or it's just like tiles with cement, but there was blood like seeping in between that cement and it was starting to dry. So like Joseph is there trying to clean up this blood because Matilda told him to come clean up Valencia's blood, and it was starting to stain. So Matilda just took bleach and just like poured it in between like the tiles because she was just like so sick and tired of it, and she was just tired of having Valencia's blood there. And then like she did that, and as Joseph was about to leave, she basically just told him like, go get your wife's shoes out of the dustbin. She threw them there by herself. Valencia's body was taken to the Roodepoort Medico Legal Mortuary, and her autopsy was done a couple of days after she was deceased. And her cause of death was said to be a penetrating incision across the lower abdomen uterus. Her legs had been tied up with a brown cloth, and she had a huge cut on her lower abdomen, and this cut was about 26 centimeters long. She also had a 12 centimeter cut on her left arm, as well as 1 centimeter cut just below her chin. And once the doctor like had opened up like where the 26 centimeter cut was, like the doctor opened it up to see what was there, and then she found a huge black plastic bag that had been like stuffed inside of her. After this, the doctor went to the investigating officer and told him that Valencia's death was most likely a homicide and not caused because of labor complications. Clinic records dated the 6th of December 2011 show that Loretta had went to like the doctor and told the doctor that she hadn't had her period in like the last 2 months, but she had told other people that the last time she had her periods was like earlier in the year. So Loretta did know that she was not pregnant. 4 months prior to Valencia's murder, Loretta had carefully planned her fake pregnancy and convinced her family, her boyfriend, as well as her employer that she was pregnant. In September, she gave her employer a letter from her doctor stating that she was 6 months pregnant, and that on the 7th of December of that year she would be admitted into hospital because that was around the time that she should be giving birth. And upon investigating, they found out that Loretta had forged this doctor's letter, and like the sonar scan she had basically just like found on the internet. And they also saw like in her recent searches that she searched how to perform a Caesarean section. Matthew says that he didn't notice any obvious signs of pregnancy in Loretta because he said, and I quote, "Want Loretta is a mooi groot gebou," which basically just means like Loretta has a beautiful large figure. He says he did notice that she did like her feet were swollen at times. Also, Loretta would constantly post on Facebook, like she would post about her pregnancy, how she's feeling, about her swollen feet, how tired she is, how she can't wait to give birth. And also her colleagues had thrown her like a baby shower before she went on maternity leave, and no one noticed anything. Loretta was admitted to Sterkfontein Psychiatric Hospital on the 13th of February 2012 for observation, and she was there for just over a month. The team's findings was that there was no signs of mental illness or intellectual deficit, and she was declared fit to stand trial. Over 2 years later, on the 26th of September 2014, Loretta Cook was convicted of premeditated murder and 1 count of exposure of a young child and was sentenced to life in prison. And that's it for today's case. If you guys have any comments, please leave them down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!